Hey, you, wherever you are in the world right now, thank you so much for being here with me. We know that we live in some volatile times and we know that the world is changing. So let's create a bridge as we travel through one another's countries, removing all the labels and just coming together as one people in this home, one world. And as we do this, this is why our signature talk today, Get Out the Door, is so important. Today, I'm super excited to have my guest speaker, David Hollingsworth. How are you, David?
I'm doing great, Catherine. How are you today?
I am fantastic, and I am very excited to have you as a guest today with Retreat to Peace. For our audience, I understand that you're an award-winning speaker, a storyteller, an expert in building high-performance teams, and also the author of Get Out the Door. You have performed at the Moth, which is in DC. I guess that's an improv and stand-up, right?
Mm-hmm.
and you've also done stand-up in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2004, you had suffered a devastating motorcycle accident, fracturing your spine, and you were actually told that you would not be able to walk again. So over the several months that you were going through this, you had to learn how to stand and walk and went from a wheelchair to running the Marine Corp Marathon. That is really incredible stuff. Like, I am saying this and I'm having a hard time, wrapping my head around the idea of having this horrific accident and then actually being in a wheelchair and getting up and moving. So I'm very grateful that you can be with us today, because I just know there's so many people in the world that are listening, some of which actually may be recovering from a motorcycle accident in a hospital, or maybe somebody is, in a bed listening because they're recovering from something. So I know you have a lot of message of hope and inspiration. So tell me a little bit about what happened that day. So you got on this motorcycle and what happened?
Sure. I was going through what some people would term a midlife crisis. I had, my two kids were, growing up, and I was successful in my career, and I was kind of looking for something fun to do. And I had never tried riding a motorcycle before. So despite my wife's advice against it, I told her that I would be very safe with everything. I made sure I wore a helmet, a jacket, gloves, boots, had the smallest street legal motorcycle I could get. So it wasn't some big Harley Davidson big motorcycle. This was a little Honda Rebel 250. And I would tool around the neighborhood, learning how to ride and trying to be safe with it. One day, was practicing in an elementary school parking lot, going around doing little figure eights and turns, starting and stopping, just practicing the skills I needed to be safe. As I was crossing the parking lot, I was also practicing stopping suddenly. So I would start at one end of the parking lot, accelerate to the other side, and stop. Well, on the third pass, I hit a patch of sand about halfway across the parking lot and started to lose my balance. And if you use your balance, you tend to grab onto whatever's closest to you. I happen to be right-handed, so I grabbed the throttle, and the bike shot forward. And before I could stop the motorcycle, I hit a curb and was bounced off the bike and landed with my back directly on the curb, which shattered my L2 vertebra. In the ER report, it says an explosive burst fracture of the L2 vertebrae on 3 axes with 60% compression of the spinal canal. And my right leg was initially paralyzed. I couldn't feel it at all. The paramedics came, took me to the hospital, and they had to stabilize me for 2 days before they did surgery. And right before they put me under for the surgery, the doctor said, "I don't know if you're going to walk again." And then after a 7.5-hour surgery, I woke up and I had a 4-level spinal fusion. They glued my L2 back together, put a bone graft in it, did a laminectomy, and then I had a brace that went from my armpits to my hips that I had to wear for the next 6 months to basically keep me in one piece. So I was hospitalized for about 3 months and had to learn to stand and walk all over again. So when I left the hospital, I could walk about 10 feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
So can I just ask you a little bit about your hospital stay?
Sure.
So, I mean, I think, when anybody goes through this life transformation, like you have a doctor that comes in and says, you might not be able to walk again.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you didn't share this, but what was your reaction to that news?
Well, I was pretty doped up at the time, so it was a little bit muted. But when a doctor starts a conversation with, we're going to do everything we can, it's the next thing you hear is not going to be good. So as I went under, I was wondering, well, what's it going to be like? Will I be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life? What will I do with my kids? What will my marriage be like? It's all those things you think about. Well, how is life going to be different? Go through your head. And it took me a long time to get adjusted to that new reality. Fortunately, that reality changed and improved over time. But there was a period there where I had to adjust to the potential reality of what life could be like. And I think a lot of people have obstacles thrown in front of them where they don't know what the future is going to be. And it takes a lot mentally and emotionally to adjust to that. So I understand that, even though fortunately most people will not have had a motorcycle accident like I did, everybody has things thrown in front of them where they don't know what the answer is. And it is difficult to adjust to.
Yeah. And I think, in that moment too, you're probably questioning, as you said, a lot of things, not just your relationship with your wife, but your physical being and what you're able to do and all of these things. But I think there's probably a part of you that's also wondering, what can you wrap your arms around of the things that you actually can do, right?
Oh yeah. Once I got out of the hospital and started to walk around, I mean, there are certain things you start to be appreciative of that you were never appreciative of before. When just even getting to and from the bathroom by yourself, without having somebody have to assist you. You become grateful for those little things, because when they're taken away from you, then you realize how much your independence means. So I was grateful for all the help that I had, but once I was able to be more independent, I was very grateful for that. So you don't know what you have until it's taken away. And as it comes back, you become more appreciative of what you do have.
Yeah. And I think that's such a special gift for the audience, for everyone to hear, because so many people in the world, they have the ability to do so much and they take it for granted. And, just the smallest things. And I think for myself, I'm very appreciative even of the smallest things, because I actually had a family member who had MS, and she has since passed, but she was a quadriplegic from her armpits down. So she didn't have the ability to take care of herself and just get up out of a chair and walk, or, go outside the way that most of us would do. So I appreciate what you're saying. And, I'm so thankful that you were able to turn everything around for yourself. So to share a little bit more about how that happened. So you leave the hospital, you're in this wheelchair, you're told you're not going to be able to walk.
Right.
I mean, did you go through a depression at all as part of the grieving process, or how did that work for you?
Oh, there are certainly days where I felt good, and there were days where I felt, how is this ever going to be better? I actually did walk before I left the hospital, but not much before. I would either get wheeled down to physical therapy or wheel myself down, go to the elevator, go down 3 floors, do physical therapy, and then come back. And I had a nurse who was working with me from the very beginning of the hospital. Her name is Peace, and she was from Ghana, and she was in the night I came in from the emergency room. So about a week before I left the hospital, I said, "Hey, Peace, let me show you something." So I wheeled the chair up to the nurse's station, locked the wheels in place, pushed myself up, and then slowly, step by step, walked around the nurse's station and sat back in the chair. And she had never seen that. She thought that I wasn't going to walk again. And when I looked up, I said, "What do you think of that?" And she had tears in her eyes because she saw what it was like when I came in. And so she saw what impact that the care that she gave and the hospital gave on my life. And I was able to return that by showing, look, this is how far I've come. And so when people look at their own stories and say, well, I can only do this. Well, maybe this is what you can do today, but look back and see where you've come from. And that can show you just how far you can go in the future. So I tell people, don't worry about your location. Focus more on your direction, because that's far more important. If you're facing the right direction, you can go anywhere. And it's important to realize that where you are today is only where you are today. So yeah, I did have lots of times where I was mad at myself for putting myself in that position. I was frustrated with my physical condition. So there were times I did get very depressed about it. But then I'd also get angry. And growing up as a kid, I was always told that anger was a bad thing. You're not allowed to get angry. And I realized in the hospital that it's okay to Hulk out every so often. As long as you're focusing your anger in the right direction, it can be a force for good, and it can move you further and faster than just thinking about it will. So in the hospital, I got mad. And I worked a lot harder on learning to push myself up, to take that step and to push a little bit further when I felt tired. So all those emotions, whether it's depression or sadness or happiness or anger, they're all useful. And to recognize them when they come in, let them be, work through them. And you can find out, well, it was useful to go through that, because sometimes you have to grieve for what you've lost. Sometimes you have to let go of what you've been hanging on to, because it feels like if you let go of it, you're lost. No, you're just letting go to grab on to something new.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful testament of life. We go through these seasons of change, and a lot of what you described, it's almost like waves. Like you have these waves where it kind of builds and then it crashes, and it builds and it crashes. But eventually it all evens out as you move through it. And I think the important thing is just allowing yourself, like you said, to move through it at your pace. And, it's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel fear or sadness or whatever emotion that you're going through. It's okay. I think most people don't give themselves permission because they were given these preconceived ideas from other people. Like you stated, it's not okay to be angry, but why not? Why not?
There's I'm a big movie fan, and one of my favorites is The Lion King. And there's a scene with Simba and Rafiki, and Rafiki asks Simba a question, and he says something about, why you're running from your past. He says, well, the past is painful. And he takes a stick and whaps him on the head. And he goes, well, that hurt. He goes, oh, yes, the past can hurt. But are you going to face it? Are you going to run from it, or are you going to face it? Life is never static. Life is always changing, and some stuff hurts. Some stuff feels great. But if you're hurting, you're alive. And that you can feel. So sometimes it's tough to hang on through that. But if if you're hurting or you're angry or you're sad or you're happy, you know that you're part of this. Just this week, I went out for my mother's funeral back in Indiana, and you got to meet all the family. We talked about all the things we've experienced growing up, and the sadness over losing my mother, but realizing that it's all life. This is what life is all about. It's about growing and losing. It's about learning and loving. It's all these things all work together, and you got to stick around for it, because I would hate to miss a second of it.
Yeah. And you just snuck that in without me even knowing. And I'm so sorry to hear about your mom and her passing, and may she rest in peace. And I mean, it's good that you were able to get together with your family. That's really important as far as your process as well. But as far as your recovery, I mean, I wonder, when you're in this hospital bed and you get home and you're in this wheelchair and you're starting, this recovery process to get yourself back on your feet, literally, where did the fire come from? Because I know innately, as human beings, we are born with this internal, like, hardwire drive that says, there's a will to live. So what was it for you that lit that fire for you?
Sure. When we first talked, I didn't tell you about the time scale for all this. So I had this accident in 2004. And by the time the end of 2004 rolled around, I was walking okay. And in 2005, I learned how to ride a bike again. So those things were normal. And I was released from treatment after a year. And so they said, okay, go on, live your life. So I'm back to being a parent, back to going to work, doing other things. And I was okay, but really didn't realize that I was kind of stuck. And I got to about 2012, and I had gained a bunch of weight because I was more sedentary, and really got tired of being stuck where I was. I didn't enjoy being at that weight. And so I made a decision that things were going to be different, and asked my doctor. I said, I can walk, I can ride a bike. I said, can I run? And he said, yeah, if somebody's chasing you. So I signed up for a 5K, just so somebody would be chasing me, and went out and tried to jog. And I jogged all of about 60 feet. And so, well, I can do that. So every day I would jog 60 feet, walk 60 feet, and I would keep expanding the number of times I was jogging. And it took me about 6 months, but I went from not running at all to my first 5K. And that's where the fire started to take over. So, wow, I can do this. Maybe I can do another one. So I did another 5K, then I did a 5-miler, and then I got up to a 10K run. And over the next few months, I got all the way up to a half marathon. And I thought, wow, if I can run a half, maybe I can run a full marathon. So that's where the doing a little bit more helped spark me to push even further. So in 2014, the 10-year anniversary of the accident, I said, okay, what's my bucket list? What are all the things that I wanted to do? So in February of 2014, I did a indoor rowing competition. 2 days later, I ran up to the top of the Empire State Building. In April and May, I did 2 sprint triathlons. And later in May, I did a bike ride called the Assault on Mount Mitchell, which is 102 miles with 11,000 feet of climbing, all of it at the end. So your last 30 miles are all uphill. And in November, I ran the Marine Corp Marathon. And before I ran the marathon, I was interviewed by Comcast Sportsnet, and they said, what was the toughest thing about running a marathon? I thought, wow, go back all the way to the accident and everything. The hardest part wasn't recovering. It wasn't training. It wasn't running the marathon. The hardest part was just getting up, getting off the couch and getting out the door. Doing something every day to move myself closer to where I wanted to be.
Yeah, but hang on. So I'm not sure if you answered my question.
Okay.
So what was it that gave you the fire to get up out of that chair and like move? So you said back at the hospital, you showed your nurse something, yes. And you did it again over and over with yourself, with all right. of these different, benchmarks that you had given yourself, that you made it so that you weren't just going to ride a bike. You were now going to run a marathon, and right. you're going to keep ratcheting up your goal. So you did that in the hospital. So where did that come from?
It was being dissatisfied with where I was, being, getting angry about saying, I don't want to stay here. There's someplace I want to go. And that's really where the fire came from, was being dissatisfied with where I was at the time. And I think that's maybe what I could share with others, is it's okay to be dissatisfied, because that's what can spark you to move in a different direction and change things. And what I found was it doesn't always matter which direction you go, because you might try something and say, well, that's not for me. That's okay, because once you're in motion, either physically or metaphorically, it becomes a lot easier to change your direction, because you're already doing something. The hardest part is getting started, because you've got that inertia and that emotional inertia that says, well, how do I get started? And the fact is, it doesn't matter how. Get moving in one way or another. And that's what sparked me, is once I got in motion, I wanted to keep moving forward towards bigger and bigger things.
Yeah. So if you get started in something, and somebody in the audience right now, I can hear them thinking, well, if I get started in something and it doesn't work out, then I have to start at square one, and I don't want to start at square one. So what do you say to that?
Well, you never start at square one. It's really once you've started moving, and you change direction. Like if you get in a car and you go somewhere, you realize you're going in the wrong direction. You don't have to turn around and come all the way back home. You can just turn left and go in a new direction. And you haven't lost everything. You've learned, even if you only learned, don't do that. There's all sorts of things I've tried that, I decided, well, I don't like that. That means I don't have to do it. So it's not a complete loss if you try something and it doesn't work. I mean, there's the old story about Thomas Edison and the light bulb and trying 1,000 things that didn't work. It was, yeah, that's okay. You can do 1,000 things that don't work if you find one that does.
Absolutely.
And to be okay with quote unquote failure, because failure is really just more information. And to be okay with being where you are, and not being as fast or as famous or as whatever as somebody else, to get out of that idea of comparing your road with someone else's. Like on the Assault on Mount Mitchell bike ride, if you look it up on the internet, it's for 2014. I am the last official finisher for that year, because I started cramping as I was climbing the mountain, and I kept falling further and further back. And they saying, "Do you want to quit?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want to quit, but I paid for this. I'm going to keep going." And finished with about 9 minutes to go before they cut me off. And I wear that last place finish like a badge of honor, because nobody else gets to say that. So be okay with where you are, and don't compare yourself with others, because that's a fool's errand, because they have a different road than you do.
We must be kindred souls because I say that all the time. Be okay with where you are. I mean, I have people right now that are listening to this that are laughing because that is something that I say all the time. So I couldn't agree more with you. And I love what you're saying as far as it's not going backwards. You're just gaining more information. You're moving forward. I fully agree with that philosophy as well. And if anything, for my children, when they talk about feeling like they're not measuring up in their own mind as far as what it is they have for expectations of themselves, I always say to them, but you've got, X amount of years that you've lived, that you already have life experience. And that is not for nothing. That does qualify you for a lot of things because you do have this life experience. So I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm just so happy, David, for you to, be on the show today to talk about these messages, because I know there's so many people right now in the world that really, really need to hear some of these messages. And I wonder how much of your family or maybe your spirituality or, your just walk in life has inspired you too, just to get up and get out the door and get moving and some of these things that you're talking to. I mean, how much of that played into it?
Well, I mentioned my mother a few minutes ago, and I did spring that on you. I didn't tell you about because it literally just happened in the past week. But one of the things about my mom is, again, whether it's a positive or negative trait, depends on your point of view, is that she was stubborn. And I get a lot of that from her. In her story, she was a nurse. She was studying to be a nurse in the 1950s. And 6 weeks before she graduated from nursing school, she got kicked out because they found out she was married. And again, this is the 1950s. It's a Catholic university. They had rules back then that only single women were allowed in the program. So she got booted out 6 weeks before graduation. Four kids in short order. And when in the early 1960s, she got divorced. So a single mom with 4 kids. We had to move in with my grandparents. We eventually were able to build a house next door, but we were not wealthy. I mean, we had to scrape by for everything we got. Mom went to work in a factory, went to work for General Motors for 30 years. She eventually remarried, but she worked in this factory until she retired at age 65. And when I was graduating from college, Mom was there and she said, I wish I would have graduated. And I said, Mom, you can go back to school. She said, oh, but I'm 65. I'm like, Mom, you're going to be 65 tomorrow, regardless of what you do. So at 65, she went back to nursing school. And at age 70, she graduated from Indiana University and became a nurse.
Wow.
And it all started from having that desire to be something or to do something and sticking with it. So if you ask where I got that, or where I got my tenacity, or I got my stubbornness, or whatever drove me forward, blame it on Mom. It's her fault because she gave me that gift of having that desire to keep moving despite what may seem like insurmountable odds. So if somebody calls you stubborn, thank them. That only means that you're pushing the envelope and that you're pushing towards something that you want to do. Now, it's important to be aware of others' boundaries and to respect those. But if it's between you and a goal you want to go after, it's okay to be stubborn. Because one person's stubbornness is another's tenacity. And that's where I get it from. Mom was very aware of what it took to accomplish what she did. And she made sure that we were aware of that too.
That is amazing. I mean, really, it's an amazing story and so different than the way we live today
Mhm.
in, most of our cultures and the way people are, bringing up their families and things like that. So I love that story. And what a testament to your mom, like, that's just part of keeping her with you,
Oh
the
yeah,
way
absolutely.
the
I
way
will.
that you live and all of it.
Yeah, I will carry that with me and hopefully pass it on to my kids. Is that whatever you're going after, you know, it's okay to have setbacks. It's
Mhm.
okay to get steered off the track as long as keep getting back on the horse and riding forward. I tell my daughter, she's a senior in college, and I say, now is a time to fail spectacularly. To try things that might not work out, because as you get older, you tend to be a bit more security conscious and you don't push as hard. So regardless of where you are in life, is to try things that might be good, even if they might not work out, because you'll always be ahead of where you started.
Absolutely. Now, do you regret getting on that motorcycle?
That's a good question. I did not want to go through what I went through. But if you look at how things have changed, I don't regret the journey, because it taught me things that I might not have learned otherwise. And I may or may not have run a marathon. I may or may not have done these other things. I certainly wouldn't have written a book about it. So it's given me the opportunity to touch lives in a way that I didn't think I had before. So if you have a struggle or a journey that you're going through, you don't have to be happy about it, but be grateful for what you can learn by it, because it's still your journey. And everybody has challenges that they go through, and everybody has places they want to go. So figure out what you can learn by it, and you can touch many more lives than you ever thought possible.
Yeah. And I don't know if you know the answer to this, and this might be kind of blindsiding you. I'm not sure.
Okay, that's okay.
but but I'm wondering, so I mean, pre getting onto that motorcycle,
Right.
you were this one person.
Yep.
And I'm sure, part of your acceptance into the new space that you were moving into and living
Right.
in, you've transformed. Like you literally became this different person to some degree. So, I mean, was that a good thing? Or was, like, what did you learn from that? What evolved from that?
Well, it's funny to think, okay, is going through a life-changing event a good thing? I think it's really what you make of it, that you can treat any situation as positive or negative. Now, there are situations that it is very difficult to find what the positive is. People have circumstances and situations forced upon them that can be almost impossible to find anything good about it. So, was it a good thing? I don't know. It is a thing, and I went through it. So my goal is to find what is the positive I can take from that. And that's how I tend to look at it. Is it changed me it changed me for the better. I mean, again, another movie or musical analogy in the musical Wicked, there's a song called "For Good," and there's a line that says, "Who's to say if I've been changed for the better? But I've been changed for good," which has a lot of meanings behind that. Is whether I've been changed for the better, I've been changed for good, which could mean for the better, but also means I've been changed permanently.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the people that come into your life, they all affect you. And to be open to that, where whatever circumstance you run into or whatever things you encounter, is to realize they are changing you for good. And I tend to think that they change me for the better because it's up to me to decide how those things change me. But they do change me for forever. And I tend to look at things that way. Is change is going to keep coming no matter what you do.
Mm-hmm.
But to try to turn that change into something that can be positive for not only you, but also the people around you.
Yeah. I love that, because that whole line that you just said from Wicked, I think
Yeah.
that's such a powerful line, and it's so true. But it really does bring us back to the power of the mind and what we decide, what we choose to believe.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Abraham Lincoln is reputed to have said, most people are about as happy as they make their minds up to be.
yeah.
And whether he said it or not, I do believe that, that how we view things is critical to how we get through them. And I have bad days just like everybody else. And I have to make a decision as to, well, am I going to let this affect me more than just the moment? Or am I going to let this affect the people around me? Or am I going to do something about it? And I tend to fall on the side of, let's do something, even if it's not perfect, because at least I have some control over it at that point.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's so many people right now in the world that are in this really foggy space, right? What would your advice be to some of those people that are living in that space right now?
Well, in the last, since the beginning of this year, with COVID, it's changed the circumstances that lots of people live in. We've been stuck in our houses. We've not been able to go places. We've had to be very careful about our interactions with people to make sure that either we don't get sick or get people around us sick. And it's tough. I mean, as human beings, we are social animals. It's good for us to interact with other people, but this has made it difficult. So what I try to do is to find some other way to get that done. I mean, obviously social media is one way, but just like in real life, you've got to be careful of your social interactions to make sure that we're being positive where we can be, we're being kind where we can be. At my mother's service, I said something that said, okay, what lesson would I give? I said, be kind to other people, even if they don't think like you do. And having just gone through this election, is like, there's a lot of things people have said that have made lots of people angry. Even if they think differently than I do, they're still people. They still have the same wants and desires that I have. So I have to be okay with letting them be who they are, and to be kind where I can, because that's how I'm getting through it. And if I got all wound up in what other people are thinking or whatever they're spouting off about, that's not going to help me. It's not going to help anybody else. And for the people who are hurting, who are stuck at home, is there anything I can do for them? So like even in the smallest interactions, like if I order food to be delivered, even if I can't interact with that person, I'm going to make sure that I tip well, because that's something I can do for them. They're working hard to make sure this happens. If I'm out driving in the car, maybe not be in so much of a hurry, let somebody, let that person go in front of you. Those are things I have control over. And that where I can, be kind, even if they're not like me. And that's what I'm trying to live by.
Yeah. And I think that's really important right now with the entire planet, is everybody just being kind, have compassion, have empathy, because the entire world is grieving. The entire world is feeling a lot of stress, and that is making an impact globally. So it's really important that people are taking care of each other and taking care of themselves. I mean, it's really, really important that people are taking care of themselves. And collectively, everyone around the world will heal, but it's important that we understand we're not alone. We can reach out, we can get help, we can, fall on each other to help each other and lift each other up. And I love that you're doing that with people that you don't even know, but you're interacting with. You're helping to lift them up, and I think that's so important. I just wonder too, as people are in some of these dark spaces, like, do you have any advice for them? Like if somebody is living in a state of depression right now and they're listening to our show, what would your advice be for somebody who's in that space?
It would be, I think, foolish to say, hey, things are going to get better. Things do change. And some things we have to go through can be depressing. And I've not gone through some of the things that other people have gone through, but I've been down before. I've seen where it doesn't seem like there's any way out of a situation. And it's a tough spot to be in. And yeah, you can hear my cat in the background. He's realized I'm talking to somebody. The challenge is to realize that everything passes, nothing is permanent. And to just hang on for a little bit longer and to do something, because life is all about change. And no matter how tough a current situation seems, it will change. And to keep pointing in the direction, towards whatever light it is at the end of that tunnel, and keep moving towards that. When I was running one of the marathons, one of the things I kept telling myself is that finish line never gets any further away. Every step I take is getting me one step closer. So I would actually play in my head, how many steps is it to the end of this? And, it's 12,000 now. Well, now it's only 11,000. And just keep moving, because as long as you're moving, you're getting closer. And that's what I would impart to people is keep working towards where you want to go, because no matter how you feel right now, you can always make it a little bit better. And it doesn't have to be some huge leap to make it better. It's just a tiny bit better. Garmin, the sports equipment, or the GPS maker, they have a slogan that says, beat yesterday. You don't have to beat everybody else. You don't have to beat anything. Just beat yesterday. And that's good enough. And if you do that, you're ahead of the game. And that's what I would encourage people to do, is to just take one step in that direction, and that'll help.
It is phenomenal advice. And again, somebody out there is laughing right now, because that's one of the things I say is to keep moving. Because I know for myself, it was instrumental in just moving through some really, traumatic experiences and getting to the other side. And I've told people, like, put it on a sticky note, you're one step closer. And as a, someone who used to run as well, I would envision in my mind those races, and I would just see myself, moving through that process of running and passing, and, what it was that was happening to my body and my environment, and passing the trees or whatever it would be around me and my surroundings. But to your point, you envisioned your finish line, at the end of the tunnel. And when I did it, it was more like I saw the finish line, but I knew that as soon as I got over that finish line, there would be a new finish line.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'd have to keep moving through the process. But getting back to what we said earlier, it's like collectively all of these, moments of finish lines are moving us through to wherever it is that we want to go, in the direction, like you had said, that we want to be in. And I love what you said earlier about don't worry about your location now. Just, it kind of all ties in, right? So it's like, don't worry about being right here, right now. Just keep moving through the changes, and eventually you're going to cross one finish line. And is it going to be uncomfortable?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You're going to be tired. You're going to want to just, do nothing. But no, you need to get up. You need to keep moving, and you'll get past the next finish line. And it's really interesting. I think, with everything going on, one of the things that has been abundantly clear is a conversation I used to have with my children when they were young. And I remember them when they were going from one grade to another, they would come to me and say, well, I don't feel good about this, because now we're going to a new school and there's upperclassmen, and, they're going to be bullying us or whatever. And I would always say to them, that's growth. And when you go to that new school, the first day is going to be uncomfortable. The second day is going to be a little easier. The third day, it will get a little easier than the second day. And eventually it's not going to be a big deal, because you've grown through it. And now you're just operating like it's a new normal. And that's what's going to happen until you get to the next thing. So it's kind of like running that race. So I love your analogy, because it's very much in alignment with how, I look at things as well. So thank you for sharing that. And I know with you wrote this book, so Get Out the Door, which is great. And it's all about your process, your story. So I want to, just make a note of that for the audience. If they wanted to, find you, that they can find you. And, that's the book that you have that you're releasing into the world. And I guess if I had another question for you, it really would be, do you have any other ideas or thoughts around, where we are in the world right now, and anything else that you haven't mentioned that could be helpful to people?
I think the biggest thing is to keep looking forward, because it's easy to get stuck into being down about how difficult things are right now. But life is all about change, and take that first step. And once you take that first step, you can take another. And that's the whole philosophy behind what I wrote in the book is, once you get started, it's easy to keep moving towards where you want to go. Life is never perfect. Life is never final. So keep pushing forward. And I think that, I'm positive we will get through this. We have been through, across the planet, we have been through change after change and struggle after struggle, but life does go on. Yeah. And I'm very optimistic that we'll get through this too. Life will be different, and I need to get over mourning about how life was, because it'll be different. For better, for worse, it'll be different, and to be okay with that.
Yeah. And your mom, like, I mean, the impact that she had on your life, learning that from a very young age, and the gift that she gave you of just being malleable and flexible to change and adversity. When it comes up, you just push through it and keep on going. So David, I love having you as a guest, because you're like the perfect person to really talk through this. And I congratulate you on taking such a god-awful experience and turning it into something that is just very powerful and beautiful, and messaging out to the world. I have one more question for you. I ask all of my guests that, join me on Retreat to Peace, if I were to find your earth angel feather on the ground and I picked it up, what would your message to the world be?
Everybody has obstacles that they want to overcome, and everybody has places they want to go. And the hardest part of any journey is getting out the door. Once you do, the rest is easy.
And that is the hardest part, isn't it? Just getting up and getting out the door. I hear your kitty cat.
Yeah, he's come on up. Oh, he'll be up here in a second. But yeah, he doesn't like it when I talk to other people. So he comes in and meows until I pick him up.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. David, I'm so filled with gratitude for having you as my guest speaker today. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
And thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with your listeners and to remind them that, in the moment, it may not feel like a blessing or an opportunity, but every moment is worth having. And just keep pushing forward and you'll get there.
Absolutely. Thank you again. And that's all we have time for today. This is Catherine Daniels with Retreat to Peace, reminding you to live your authentic life with peace. And we'll see you next time. Welcome back. This is Catherine Daniels. And how amazing was David's story about his resiliency to persevere and continue to grow and challenge himself in what it was that he was doing and just really pushing forward. He's so inspiring, and it got me thinking about what is the best advice that you've ever been given. I just wonder if you look back on your life and you think about the different people who have crossed your paths, the influences you've had along the way, what would be a piece of advice that you would say really impacted your life and allowed you to make some changes that maybe you wouldn't have made before? As I was thinking about this, I was thinking that it's really poignant for us to be aware of some of these motivating factors that come into our life and think upon what it is and how it affects us to move forward. So some of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given is just to trust. Trust in my abilities, trust in my higher power, trust in the fact that it will be okay, and allow myself to go through whatever it is I'm going through with a level of trust that I'm not living in a space of fear and I'm not putting myself into a space of anxiety. A lot of times we can go into a space of anxiety because we're glimpsing into our own daring spaces of what may be ahead. So that can put us into anxiety, but that's not something that we want to do as far as where we live or be. So when I look at my life and I look at advice, I think trust is so abundantly clear. But then also, when you're presented with an opportunity, take a moment to live in gratitude. And also, instead of always saying no to something, give something a try. Maybe say yes. Maybe say yes to embracing a new experience or learning something new. But believe that by saying yes, that things will be okay. And even if they're not turning out the way that you expected, at least you've been given an opportunity to have that experience. Do your best in everything that you do. It's really important that we put our best foot forward every day and just continue to improve what it is that we're working through, our personal journeys, how we're going through life. It's so, so important that we continue to honor ourselves in that space. I am really, really excited about my guest speaker next week. So her name is Claudia Baumert. She is actually a nutritionist that's going to be coming to our audience and talking about nutrition and the correlation that it has to the body, and also how manifesting disease can occur with our nutrition. A lot of people have autoimmune diseases such as arthritis, Hashimoto's, gluten. There's so many of them. You can just keep going and going for a while. But she's going to come to us and she's going to talk about some of the things that we can do to address this, but also acknowledge that a lot of people who are empaths, a lot of people that are highly sensitive people, that they may be prone to more of these types of issues because of how they're going through life and what it is that they're doing. So we're going to have a really great conversation. I invite you to join us next week for this signature talk, Nutrition Vitality. And I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody next week and being part of this. So thank you so much, as always, for being part of this journey with me. And I encourage you to join me next week to get some valuable insight into our own nutrition and nutrition vitality. Have a great week, everyone. And as always, this is Catherine Daniels with Retreat to Peace. Live your authentic life in peace. And as always, retreat to peace. And we'll see you next time.